Racial and ethnic interrelations is one of the most vulnerable areas for demoralization. There is not a single...
True.
Yeah, very true.
True. It is vulnerable area. Very true.
Communist country where racial groups are equal and enjoy as much freedom to develop themselves culturally and economically as in America.
True.
Yeah. Keep going.
It's so funny.
You're hitting all...
because
Go ahead.
he's hitting all the points. No, but it's so funny because you have all the commies who act like they try to always associate sexism and racism with capitalism. And you say, okay, well, where are all these like anti-capitalist communist countries that are like the fucking egalitarian utopia of races? Where's that happening in the world? Point to that on the map, please.
Yeah. Doesn't exist.
I don't think China really.
Oh my gosh, China's the
is
worst.
Enjoying racial freedom.
They're like genociding the Uyghurs, for heaven's sakes.
Right.
Actually, not too many capitalist countries where ethnic minorities have it as good as the USA. So I've been to many countries in the world, and I can say to you, my dear Americans, that your society is the least discriminatory. The communist solution for racial problems is final. They simply murder those who are different and stubbornly insist on remaining different. But unfortunately, an average American never recalls...
As we see in China, as we saw in the USSR.
Yeah.
These commonly known facts when his attention is drawn to domestic racial discrimination issues by those who profess racial harmony along the socialist principle guidelines. Why? Simple, because America's race discrimination fighters never mention these facts. If the USA was located on a separate planet from the communists, I would probably agree with Martin Luther King when he said America is a racist country. But when these statements are made in this planet and the most integrated nation in the world, I say to your fighters for racial equality, you are hypocrites and instruments of demoralization. The American traditional solution...
So but here's what's important to say. Yuri's not claiming in this statement that he just read, he's not claiming that there aren't valid race issues. He's just saying that if you look at everything in context, in perspective, that especially when he wrote this in the 80s.
Oh my God, I know. When racism was 10 times worse. Right.
But he's saying that in America, race situations are better than anywhere else that he's ever been in the world. And certainly better than in a communist country. So, which is true. Now, again, that doesn't mean that there's not room for improvement, but that's a straight fact. I don't see these communist countries propping up, everywhere, with this great racial egalitarianism. It's not happening.
Yep.
Solution of racial and ethnic problems is slow but efficient. The melting pot which raises the least developed groups to a higher level.
True.
Yeah, melting pot even. Look at that.
True. Melting pot cultural assimilation is the key to destroying racism.
Yeah, you got to socialize people to be on the same team.
Yes. The problem with the whole multicultural woke model is that they literally want to say every single person should come from wherever they come from and they should not have to assimilate to some aspect of American culture.
Yes. They want to change the melting pot to a salad.
Right, which is dumb.
Yeah.
Which is dumb. The whole reason of the melting pot is you want to have the cultural Darwinism. You want to have sort of like the good ideas stay and add to the flavor and the bad ideas, go away.
It has worked for more than a century of American history and created the most harmonious and productive nation on earth. So get a load of this part. The present...
Hear that? How he's laughing?
He's laughed.
He's like about the most harmonious.
Harmonious and productive.
Like, this is so fucking racist. You think this is harmonious?
Well, that's what's so... Again, they always like to remove everything from context. Like, yeah, obviously America has so many problems with its history and racism.
Oh, hell yeah.
Stuff.
Yeah. No one's denying that. He's not going, America's the utopia on a hill. We have absolutely zero problems.
Right.
Race hasn't been an issue for 50 years. Like, he's not saying that.
Yeah. No, he's just saying if you look at the history of the world.
Yeah, exactly.
Everyone's been super fucked, and America is doing the best, right now.
Oh my God. In this book, it's hard to deny American exceptionalism reading this book. Because after World War II, America did something like no one's ever done. We basically treated all the losers as if they had won the war and gave them like everything they wanted. Which is crazy. Nobody does that.
I know.
The solution to racial inequality is borrowed from the communist mythology, equality of all racial and ethnic groups, legislated by the government and enforced by state bureaucracies. So Yuri thinks that the state enforcing laws to help with racial equality and to help end racial discrimination is a bad thing. This is
not remotely what he's saying. Not remotely what he's saying at all. Yes, he's not saying that these laws are bad. He's not saying that equality is a bad thing.
This is the guy that Treyarch wants to base their whole trailer on, their whole story on. The guy who believes the state should not make laws to stop racial discrimination.
Not remotely what he's saying. Not remotely what he's saying. He's talking about forcing people to believe things that just are factually incorrect, subjugating themselves to the state.
We know perfectly well that neither races nor individuals are equal in every respect. We know that every nation and race has its peculiar character, abilities, traditions, mentality, and ability to learn at its individual pace of development. By mimicking the Soviet national policy of equality, America is simply a race of distinct racial characteristics which have made this country great. So a nice dose of racism.
That's quite the opposite of racism. He's saying that America has banished those racial distinctions through law. I want to back it up a little
Perfectly
here.
well that neither races nor individuals are equal in every respect. We know that every nation and race has its peculiar character, abilities, traditions, mentality, and ability to...
I think he's thinking that that's what he's calling racist, but he's not.
What? I'm back.
I just backed it up. He's reading. He's basically making this section in. He's saying Yuri is saying the opposite of what he's actually saying. Yuri is saying that each race has different cultural particularities,
right?
That are basically you should ignore in order to make the society cohere. And he's basically saying that that's racism. Here, I backed it up anyway. You didn't miss anything.
This is the section I was talking about where he was saying if you wanted to paint him as a racist, he would point to the whole when he says that each race is not equal, because he's going to interpret
he
that.
Doesn't. He's not saying that they're not. They're different. This is tough.
Right. No, but when from my interpretation of Yuri's thing, he's not saying races aren't equal in terms of like, oh, they don't have, black people aren't as smart as white people. He just means in terms of like, they're not the same. As he says, every race has its own culture, its own traditions.
Yes.
Exactly.
The
blah, 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 blah. Because if you look at it, he says, and mentality. Though I guess you could interpret, maybe he's being a little racist when he talks about their ability to learn. Don't know. But you could definitely, to me, it's definitely framed as being anti multiculturalism, pro melting pot.
His media training definitely
not the greatest.
Is not the greatest on the word. Not if he's talking about intelligence, which is a hot button issue. But there's a great analogy that he actually uses in the book Why Gender Matters about how equal is such a weird word because different it doesn't necessarily mean unequal. If he says, he compares boys and girls to like a knife versus a spoon. Like if you have a bowl of soup, a knife is going to be totally useless to you. If you have a nice steak, a spoon is going to be totally useless to you. It doesn't mean that they're not equal. Both are just different tools for different jobs. So I feel like that is the argument that Yuri's making here, that, he's not saying that these races are the different distinctions make them unequal. It's a tough one. You understand the point that I'm making. Yes. But he immediately points out, he's like, this is racist. This is totally racist. He's saying, and he also goes as far as saying like America, Yuri is against America making laws for equality. That's exactly what he says. But Yuri's actually saying America has made laws that
well, see, he's conflating
are for equality. Right.
Because again, it's always important that when you look at something from an older time period, you have to understand that language evolves and changes.
Yeah, exactly.
So because what this guy's advocating for is equity.
Yes.
And that's what That's what Yuri is referring to when he says equality. He's talking about the idea that you have to have equality of outcome.
Yep.
And equity. Yes.
It's so good that we have that distinction now, though. But they didn't used to have that distinction.
Right.
At its pace of development, by mimicking the Soviet national policy of equality, America simply erases distinct racial characteristics which have made this country great. So
see, he's saying by doing this, by our policies, we're erasing the racial distinctions because we're treating everybody as if they are the same.
Right.
That's good. That's anti-racist. But here he says, "Oh no, that's totally racist."
Nice dose of racism from Yuri there. Again, what a great guy, Treyarch. Please make more stories based on this guy.
How does he? This is just so weird.
Well,
equal protection under the law. That's racist.
Well, it's funny because even if Yuri is racist, okay, it doesn't matter in terms of whether he's right or not about how communist propaganda is pushed and how it, infiltrates into the minds and culture of the people. It's totally irrelevant to that.
He was saying that the Soviet Union had adopted the same policy, though, the anti-racist policy. He was saying that his background was to make us in America adopt policies that were bad. So they were competing against America, correct?
No, he's saying the communist solution for racial problems is final. They simply murder those who are different and stubbornly insist on remaining the same. Stalin played with the whole populations of ethnics, resettling Estonians, Latvians, Lithuanians in Siberia and relocating
oh my God, that's crazy.
Crimean Tatars from the tropics to the permafrost and Koreans from the Far East to the Kazakhstan deserts.
Wow.
But unfortunately, an average American never recalls these commonly known facts when his attention is drawn to domestic racial discrimination issues by those who profess racial harmony along with these socialist principle guidelines. Why? Because American race discrimination fighters never mention these facts.
Wow.
Okay, and then he read the other part after that.
Wow.
And that's why he says, the American tradition solution for racial and ethnic problems is slow but efficient. The melting pot, which raises the lesser developed groups to a higher level. Now, you could argue that Yuri's either, again, it's difficult because this is 1980, so it's difficult to look at the language through 2020 to know exactly what Yuri's meaning. Because I'm assuming when he says raise the less developed groups to higher level groups, what he means is, take the quote unquote barbarous, less developed cultures and raise them up to American culture, which obviously is invoking the whole white man's burden
sure,
thing.
Totally.
Sure. So yes, Yuri seems a little racist, sure, but hey, looks like his heart's in the right idea. Okay, in the right place.
That's crazy though that Stalin.
He wants the melting pot.
That's crazy that Stalin dealt with the race issue just by murdering all the different races. That's so bad.
Right, but exactly, and that's the great irony of all this is that the communists are professing that America has such a bad way of dealing with race issues, and it's like, well, what did the fuck the communists just literally just murdered and delocated everyone to horrible places that had a race issue with them.
Siberia is a death sentence,
right.
So pretty much.
And in America, it's like, yes, the road is long and it's bumpy, but we're trying to get there. We're trying to melt together to make a unified American identity, a common humanity.
Yeah.
Together.
Making up so he can get in with the American far right to make a new cushy home for himself after he defected from the Soviet Union.